Okay, welcome to the cybersecurity and ethical hacking training. This is the pen test course based on the CompTIA PenTest curriculum. Okay, this is an abridged version of the entire curriculum that brings out most of the high points of the course content. So we've looked at, and just to say my name is Victor, and if it's the first time you're watching this presentation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also like. If you have questions, you could comment. If you have feedback, you can also use the comment section. And you have questions, there's a WhatsApp group. You could ask questions also on the WhatsApp group and I'll attend to you. Okay, now we said you have different stages while you're trying to do your penetration testing. The first step is you want to first plan and scope. And the second thing you want to do is to do reconnaissance and footprinting. And the third thing you want to do is to actually create or perform your attack and exploits. So this brings me to module 3. Now, attacks and exploits. What are the kind of questions you could get on test day or interview day, or where you're trying to deploy this? Are you going to be using social engineering? What are the different types of social engineering techniques you can be using? Okay, first let's start with the first one, attack and exploit. So you can be using social engineering attacks. I've already explained this earlier on. Then what kind of, are you going to be attacking the wireless, the infrared, the network, the applications, or the local host? There are some companies that deploy web applications within their local servers or local systems, maybe using open source or third-party applications so that they could easily deploy. They could easily develop and deploy to their remote servers. You might want to be testing that. Now, physical security attacks. Then, of course, post-exploitation techniques. We want to be looking at that also. I've talked about this kind of questions that you might be asked on your actual test day, the very day you want to carry out these attacks, or during an interview with your sponsor or the owner of the test, or if you're writing the CompTIA and already the CompTIA PenTest exam. Then for social engineering, so you have phishing, you have spear phishing, you have whaling, you have SMS phishing. So phishing is when victims are contacted by email, telephone, or text messages by someone posing as a legitimate organization. So most of the times when you hear the word phishing, just let this word come to your mind. Make believe, right? Make believe. Looks real. So when something looks real, but it's not real, that is a classical example of a phishing attack. And what's the goal? Get out sensitive information, pick out PII, personal identifiable information, banking information, your passwords. Therefore, spear phishing, when it's targeted to a specific individual or a specific person or a specific type of role. For whaling, when the target is for the C-level executives. The C-level executives will mean the chief executive officer, we mean the chief financial officer, the chief information officer, and the chief security officer. So all these are C-level, top-level executives and other high target persons. Then, of course, for SMS phishing, when phishing is being carried out via SMS. The phishing, when it's being carried out over the phone, it's called phishing. Then elicitation, when you've been asked some series of information or questions just to get information from the person, is a form of social engineering. This is your boss. This is your boss's boss. And I need you to send me the quarterly financials. Now, the question is, if your boss always sends the financials you give to him to somebody else, and this attacker gets to know when your boss is not going to be available or reachable on phone, or is in a meeting that is a prolonged meeting for like 4, 5, 6 hours, this attacker have already gotten that information from footprinting and reconnaissance stage. So since he knows that, he can now send you a message and say, I'm the boss of your boss. Send me quarterly financials, very urgent. He knows you will not be able to reach your boss to verify. So, and anytime you see sense of urgency, it's something you want to always double check. Interrogation. Another thing you need to know about interrogation, for instance, if you're writing, either in practice or if you're writing the pen test exam by CompTIA, you should understand that these techniques is only reserved for law enforcement. So you should stop at the technical aspects of doing your pen test. You should not be interrogating anybody. You should not be trying to get information from somebody while you're trying to use the interrogation technique of social engineering. Impersonation, very, very explanatory. Shoulder surfing, over the shoulders, where somebody's trying to steal information from you, either username, passwords, pins, over the ATM, over your computer, over whatever. Then USB key drop. So this is where somebody puts in a malicious application or a backdoor, a malware, a keylogger into a flash drive. Now just drops it anywhere within the building, right? Parking lot close to the building or close to where he intends to get information from. And when it does that, just drops the USB, the flash drive, what is going to happen is that somebody is going to pick up that flash drive and try to see what can I get from the flash drive. So while he's trying to do that, of course, he's being compromised. Another thing you need to know is there needs to be some motivation factor. Authority, urgency, social proof, fear. How do you know that there might be an attack? Fear. That sense of urgency, very, very always used together most of the times. So there's a sense of urgency. It infuses fear to you, and you now want to aid them commit the attack. Authority. People are more willing to comply with the request when they think it's coming from somebody in authority. Yes. Like the previous form of attack, this is your boss's boss, and I need to send me the quarterly financials. Now I can add some sense of urgency when I say, this is your boss's boss, and I urgently need you to send me the quarterly financials because we're in a meeting right now. Right? For the fact that your boss is in a meeting does not mean that this attacker is with your boss, right? So, but the attacker have really understood, have done footprint and reconnaissance for some while, understand that by so time of the day or so time of the month, your boss is always going to be on a long meeting, 4, 5, 6 hours. He can make a call to you or send you an email and say, please, it's urgent. This is your boss's boss. I need to send. You can even use the email, clone an email of your boss, or use something that looks like your boss's email because he knows the name. How does he know the name? He has done what we've learned previously: reconnaissance, footprinting, enumeration, scanning, or getting email address from social engineering techniques, or by going to the websites to get all of those email address and whatever. He could open several that type of email that looks like that particular email address, and he sends an email or he calls and he says, I urgently need, this is your boss's boss, I need the quarterly information urgently because I'm in I'm in a meeting with your boss and he's not readily available now. So if you do that, he has infused urgency, fear, authority, or let me say he has infused authority and urgency. If he adds that, except you want me to dismiss you guys. Okay, this is your boss's boss, and I need you to urgently send this quarterly information because we might lose finance from our investors, right? So he has added authority, urgency, and fear. You don't want to lose funds from investors because if that happens, you are going to lose your job. Then you have social proof, right? So because somebody else is doing that, somebody is clicking, doesn't mean you should. So social engineering through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever, lots of likes and shares does not mean most of those likes. I was discussing with a student a while ago, some few weeks ago. She was asking about most of the likes and shares you see sometimes on social media. A lot of them are just by bots, right? Not all of them are true. So that you see a lot of likes, a lot of traffic, a lot of this does not mean it to be legitimate. Okay, physical security attack. So you have piggybacking and tailgating. So this is when somebody follows another person behind, a piggyback, tailgate behind the person into a secure location and tries to perform or commit an attack. Of course, when the pen tester follows an authorized person into a secure location, right? Fence jumping, dumpster diving, they're very self-explanatory. Fence jumping, dumpster diving, lock picking, lock bypass, batch cloning, right? This can be very, very common. Link local multicast name resolution. So this is within a Windows environment. Protocol that are based on DNS packet formats allows IP version 4, IP version 6 hosts to perform name resolution for hosts. If you implement a Windows server, a Windows system within your network, the question is that who are you going to be allowing access into your domain name server, right? So you want to make sure that you have lock for or have access control for who you're allowing access. This is useful when temporary network is created, such as ad hoc Wi-Fi network. So they all use this link local multicast name resolution. And in networking, we understand that different types of casts. So we have the unicast, multicast, and broadcast, right? Unicast just one, broadcast many, then multicast all, right? So what most times when you are using this system for an ad hoc Wi-Fi network, you allow everybody to it broadcasts to everybody. So for the server message block, of course, that's what Windows use for file sharing, printer sharing, and remote services. Now, the good thing about most of these protocols, same thing with the simple network management protocol, they are good in their own sense. The version you use, the operating system version you use will tell if you're using a susceptible version or not. Now, for instance, for SNMP, you want to be using the most recent version, which is, I think, 2 or 3. So, okay, yes, it's 3 versions of the SNMP X. So you want to be using 3. So the version 1, we have its vulnerability, right? So the older the operating system you run, they all have their port numbers of communication. So the older the operating system, the more vulnerable most of these Windows services are. So you could be running some of these tests. Then you have what you call DNS poisoning. The question is, what is DNS? Domain name server. So for me to have a website up and running, for me to have a server up and running, I must have a DNS. I must have a domain name server. So a domain name server is typically a name most of the times which maps to an IP address for identification purposes. Like I said earlier on, I'm going to reserve everything that has to do with the labs to some other time. I'm going to make those videos. But for now, I just want to make sure that I go through the entire course content for the pen test exam in an abridged format. Now, if you have a domain name, for instance, it's going to have a DNS server. That's to say that's where that website, for instance, in this scenario, that's where that bank application picks up its files from. If you're going to have a Windows system deployed on the network, that means that's where they're going to get their access from. So when an attacker poisons the server, what happens is that it makes sure that who needs to get the right information does not get the right information. They not get something wrong, right? That's how a DNS cache poisoning can occur. Same thing with ARP spoofing. The question is, what is ARP? ARP is address resolution protocol. I have a switch. This is a symbol used by Cisco for their switches. If you do any Cisco training for packet tracer, this is always the switch symbol. This is also the switch symbol. I have a server, I have a laptop, I have another PC, right? For me to get access to this guy, I need an IP address, I need a MAC address. Those two identifiers, I need them. Then the next thing is that this guy needs to know who have a particular IP address, who have a particular MAC address, to be able to know to validate the access to a particular resource. Now, when an attacker falsifies these ARP messages, then you call that ARP spoofing. ARP address resolution protocol is very important to assign IP addresses to authenticate the IP and MAC addresses of the systems that tend to connect to a server or a host or whatever. Take, for instance, if I come on the network now, one of the first things that's going to happen is that I'm going to do some kind of request so that I'm given an IP address. Now, the server is going to check if IP addresses are available. If they're available, I'm going to be assigned one, and that is going to be binded to my MAC address. Now, if an attacker spoofs those messages, then somebody can be getting the wrong message. So that's also how you have the relay and the replay attack. Then you have some attacks that are wireless based. So you call them evil twin. Evil twin is when you have two networks, and let's say Southern Ventures 1, another network is Southern Ventures 2. Those are two evil twin. One might just be the real guy, the second one might not be a real guy, right? So the authentication attacks, fragmentation attacks, credential harvesting, the WPS implementation weaknesses when you don't implement wireless protection, encryption, bluejacking, blue snuffing, RFID. RFID is this access control. This card you have for access control. Then you have jamming. Then you have also repeating. This is an explanation for evil twin. When you have a rogue access point that appears to be legitimate but set up to eavesdrop on wireless communication. Like I explained earlier on, you create another network that looks like the real one. You have Southern Ventures 1, then you now have Southern Ventures 2, or you have let's say Bank A wireless. Somebody now creates Bank A wireless 2. So of course, the second one might be open and people will try to get into it, and of course it can be scanned and attack committed. So that's the explanation of the evil twin. Fragmented attack, I've explained this a little bit. Attackers exploit the network by using datagram fragmented mechanisms against. So instead of sending the entire fragment at once, if it's sent at once, most of the times it's going to be caught. But if you fragment it, if you break, what's it called, the fragments, the packets into bits, it's possible that an IDS or an IPS does not detect it. An IPS is intrusion prevention system, and IDS is intrusion detection system. Credentials harvesting. So somebody can create what we call a captive portal. When you visit a website, you visit a network, you visit, or somebody can just create one and tell people to, like there was a time we created, we did a course on ethical hacking. Most of the students, we created a clone, a Google sign up clone, a website, a Google sign up clone, and told them to visit the website. They visited just a subdomain name on our website. And when they clicked on it, they clicked to access your course material. When they clicked on the next page, it was the Google sign-in username and password. But that particular environment was an exact clone of the Google sign-in page. So you see, most companies implement single sign-on. They tell you sign in with your Facebook, sign in with your Instagram, sign in with your Gmail and the rest. So the question is, that particular portal, is it real or is it fake? So few of the students, especially those students that are not taking some of our trainings, 2 students taking mobile security courses, other students that have not taken some of these courses, most of those students, they just entered their username and password, and we were dumping it somewhere else, but we make sure we asterisk the details. And that is an example of how credential harvesting can be done. A captive portal, you call a captive portal just like a screen before an access portal where you collect people's details. And people's details can be collected using these techniques. So the next one is WPS implementation weaknesses. So if you don't implement strong Wi-Fi protection strategy, it will be very easy to use some techniques to actually attack your IT infrastructure. So blue attack is for Bluetooth, RFID, jamming when you are denied service, then repeating when wireless signals are being extended. Fake cell phone towers can be used to capture your MSI, can use to also create man-in-the-middle attack, right? So you want to be careful what you're connecting to. Crack-ng is a Kali Linux utility that can be used for monitoring and attacking testing. And of course, I've used this severally. This only works for passwords that are very, very weak, right? If your password conforms to these countermeasures, right? Use more than 8, 9, 10 passcode for your wireless access. You combine the different characters and the rest. I tell you, Crack-ng is not going to catch it. But if you're using very common passwords like password, admin 123, all of this kind of stuff, the Crack-ng is going to capture it. Okay, application-based vulnerability. So these are for web applications. So I implore you, if you are not into web programming, if you don't do web application development, this is one thing you want to start learning how to do, because that will help you better understand some of these things. Yeah, you have SQL injection. SQL is structured query language. So you have different types of databases. You have MySQL, you have Oracle, you have MySQL Server, you have MongoDB, you have Postgre, you have so many of them. The only way web application developers can access information from those databases are through SQL queries, structured query language. Now, what do they do when they perform structured query language? They might want to create something into the database. They might want to read something from the database. They might want to update an information on the database. They might want to delete something from the database. And that is what we call CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. Now, for me to be able to do that, I should be able to know how to use basic SQL commands. So is it the select command? For instance, this command says select all, enter mission asterisk is all, select all from users. Users is a table in my database where user ID is equal to JSON and password is my password. So what this command does is it goes to the database and goes to the table. Of course, it's querying from a particular database. JSON database. Whatever, if somebody says select all from users where user ID is JSON, of course, he knows the username already from the previous attack stage. He has done reconnaissance and footprinting, so he knows the username. What he's looking for now is a password. And the password now is, it now says, and password is equals to this or this. Now, the question is, what you have before now or this, is it true? The question is yes. So it's going to allow it. 1 is equals to 1. Is it true? The answer is yes. And of course, the person ends his or her statement. Normally, if you're running your SQL commands or PHP or most languages, you end your command with a semicolon. This is always true. And if the application is not properly built, 1 is always equals to 1. If the application is not properly built, it then means that this application will allow this user in, even when he doesn't know the password. Now, we have good advantages of using SQL statements, because if you go to an e-commerce website, for instance, and you are searching for, let's say you want to buy a Core i7, a super duper laptop, right? What you simply did was that you selected everything you have from the users table or from the product table that has laptops, and you want everything down. You just did a select statement as a user. So if the application is not properly built, users can do what we call SQL injection. They can inject into the database and pick out information. So all of these things are well documented in OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. The project is on GitHub also. There's a website for it. You could search on it. And these are different types of vulnerabilities that you can have: injections, authentication, authorization, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, clickjacking, security misconfiguration, file inclusion, unsecure coding practice. So these are the things that you can be testing as a penetration tester. So it makes sense if you don't have this skill set, if your team have this skill set, somebody can be involved in planning, documenting, somebody can be involved in the network penetration testing, somebody can be doing the web application, somebody can be doing cloud based on competencies. Okay, so this is just the explanation of the entire, each of those items. Now, the next one is privilege escalation. So kernel exploits. Now, you know, either you're using a Windows or you're using a Linux system, right? You have different types of users, right? You have different types of users. Now, what do you call privilege escalation? Even when we talk about web application, sorry, I want to talk about web application vulnerabilities. Either authentication, you're not trying to authenticate the right person, right? Or you're using a default credential, not well configured. It can also lead to privilege escalation. Or Kerberos, normally used most of the times in Windows systems. If you're using something older or something not well